Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Remnant 2 on the ROG Ally. So Unreal Engine 5 game, got lots of patches since release, and I wanted to check it out here because on the Steam Deck I didn't have a good experience. So 1080p, the native resolution, so the UI looks sharp. Then we got multiple upscalers, we got none, which is native res, don't even try this on this game. FSR3, which includes frame generation, but FSR3 looks super blocky, looks terrible in my opinion in this game. So we're going to have to skip this frame generation option, but we don't usually get a good enough frame rate to use this. Lots of input lag if you do so, at least unless you get like 50 FPS, do not enable this input lag. And XeSS looks amazing actually on Remnant 2, very stable in motion. So put it on either balance or performance. Personally, I rather go for performance for the demanding stages, but I'll use balanced because most people want to use that, and we're on 1080p on a 7-inch screen, so that's kind of nuts. Settings, low shadows still look good. Medium post processing, because, well, there's depth of field. If you hate the depth of field, disable this. Foliage on low, you'll see why in a second. Effects on low. This will turn off the reflections as far as I remember. Beauty sense on high. I didn't notice any change in performance in this game when setting this to high versus the lowest. No detailed shadows. Optimized performance in menus, yes, because when we go to the inventory it can lag and take 10 seconds to recover. So those are basically the settings. And we start here in the hub area, which is not demanding in comparison to what I'm going to show you. It's basically, well, it's pretty impressive actually. Remember that this is a UE5 game and we're on balanced XeSS. So as you can see, this part is good, but this is not the whole story. Foliage heavy areas are an absolute nightmare on this game when it comes to performance. So let me go to the place where I had the most performance issues. This area on the Steam Deck was into the 20s. So if we're plugged into the wall, we're basically at manually 30 watts. This is not the turbo mode. The turbo mode can push it to 53 watts maximum, which basically cooks the ROG Ally, so I don't recommend it. It's maybe 1 or 2 frames ahead, sometimes. So as you can see now, it actually dropped all the way down to the 30s. And this is the place where I would say, okay, maybe use performance XeSS instead of balanced, especially if you're targeting 25 watts. So again, it doesn't tell the whole story to be in the hub area or other earlier places of the game. But if you don't mind 30 FPS when plugged to the wall and want the sharpest image possible, well, you can do XeSS balanced. Oh man. And you should be good to go in most places, but here it will drop a bit below 30. So what's my advice? Performance XeSS. Balance for most of the game, performance XeSS on the on these locations. To, I don't know, you're using a power bank or something like that, you can also try 25 watts. Although for this I'll do 900p. You lose a couple frames here, it's still doable, you get super sharp UI with performance XeSS as well, because we're native 1080p. So at 25 watts, I wouldn't do 1080p just because what you see here. I would rather, honestly, do 900p with this. But at 30 watts, you can actually do 1080p pretty well with XeSS performance. And the game looks pretty sharp on the smaller screen, which I'm going to show you in a bit. I'm going to show you 900p. Just keep these same settings. In my opinion, going higher than this I think is kind of a waste. So balanced, 900p, 30 watts because plugged to the wall. You can also do 25, but you lose a couple frames, which in this game does matter quite a bit. Alright, so 900p, same settings, but balance XeSS. and you get a few extra frames. In this case, you can actually lower it to 25 watts. So it doesn't use that much power. So yeah, I think for the ROG Ally, the best middle ground will be 900p. Still looks pretty sharp on the smaller screen. The UI is not that as pixelated as 720p, which is what matters. Oh god. And yeah, I think this is the best of both worlds. It still looks pretty good. And it's balanced XeSS instead of performance, which on the smaller screen, in my opinion, is completely fine. 720p balanced XeSS, same settings as before. Let's put post-processing on low in this case. And after putting this on balance, you'll notice, oh, we have 39 FPS. Oh no. Well, this is one of the most demanding areas. So let's try frame generation. If you don't mind 720p, portably, you can get away with it. So open the AMD settings, which is right click on the desktop, go to gaming, Remnant 2, blah, blah, blah. And go for AMD Fluid Motion Frames. This is the built-in driver level frame generation. Ctrl-Shift-O. So at the top right, I have the driver level FPS counter. So since I enabled frame generation, AFMF, I have double the frame rate. Instead of 36, we have 70 something FPS. But it doesn't feel like 60 FPS. It's smoother, don't get me wrong, there's some input lag. But this is a choice you can do at 720p. If you don't mind frame generation and want to play like this, it actually looks pretty good. There's some ghosting on the UI, but it's actually serviceable. And again, this is the demanding place that I found. If you are somewhere else in the game, you can easily hit a higher frame rate. So in a less demanding place, as an example, the hub area, we hover into the 40s. So for frame generation, it's more of a realistic scenario. And with the frame generated frames, we get like 100 FPS. This feels super smooth. We're at performance XeSS at 720p, so take that as you will. In the smaller screen, it's more passable. But this is a game that I would not expect to be super fluid. I mean, it's an Unreal Engine 5 game, guys, come on. It's very demanding. So with frame generation, it's actually pretty interesting, in my humble opinion. So let's jump into handheld and see how it looks on the smaller screen. Welcome back, we're now in handheld, 1080p, 20 watts. And as you can see, with 20 watts instead of 25, we drop below 30 here without any combat. So once we get into combat, well, it's going to hurt. So what we're going to do here is drop it to 900p, or alternatively go for 25 watts. Personally, Alright, so I died multiple times while I was talking. Here's 900p. This is my recommended thing for 900p. I'm playing basically at 20 watts. You can do 18, but you'll have to sacrifice the resolution. If you want 18 watts for better battery life, you can use performance XeSS. Balance should be good enough for 900p. So 900p at 20 watts, we get like an hour and 20 minutes of battery, something like that. At 18 watts, add an extra 10 to 20 minutes. But this is basically how to get the best image quality on the smaller screen with some battery life, more than an hour. And this is the demanding area of the game. So if you're playing portably, this is my recommendation. Looks great on the smaller screen. The UI is pretty sharp in comparison to 720p. And in a demanding area like this, we're usually into the 30s, so You can lock it to 30 if you want a bit more battery life in that case. So the UI seems a little bit small, but at 900p at least it's a sharp UI, which I cannot say the same for most games. A stress test. As you can see here, it runs way better. This is the first time I get here, so there's some shader compilation stuff. But man, it looks so good like this. It's just those demanding areas with lots of foliage that bother me. But personally speaking, in an area like this, I would put it at 18 watts. You'll still be above 30 FPS. And you get a bit more battery life, which is always good to see. And again, there are some shader compilations that are unfortunately, although better than day one. On day one, there was way more of that going on. Where's the door? But as you can see, outside of the demanding stuff, it should be completely good at 900p balanced XeSS. And alternatively, go for 720. But the UI looks way more pixelated. Not great. But this is, in my opinion, if you want to maximize battery life, the best way to play. XeSS quality, 720p, lock it maybe to, well, don't lock it to 30. Maybe it's a little bit too much input lag. You get the longest battery life, probably 100 minutes. So 1 hour 40 minutes, I would say. 1 hour, maybe 1 hour and 30, 1.5 hours. And you get pretty decent performance and image quality. Again, this is when you're probably connected to a power bank. This is also a good option. But total system draw, including the screen, the speakers, the controls, the SSD, everything, it's like 28 watts. So 18 watts is only for the APU. So in my opinion, this is one great way to play as well. So after you activate that, you got the real FPS at the left. In the demanding area is 35, 36. Remember that we're at 20 watts. So we're talking about a little bit over an hour of battery. And the AFMF frame generation is at the top right corner. So visually it's 60 FPS, but we're actually playing at 30. It doesn't feel amazing. It's definitely playable. But you can feel some input lag at this frame rate. So in the worst case scenario, I wouldn't attempt the frame generated 60 FPS. But you can do it if you want to. This is worse image quality because 720p XeSS performance. But it's there if you wanted it. So considering it's 30 in the demanding part, I wouldn't recommend frame generation. For this area in particular, you're sacrificing image quality at 720p with performance XeSS, which has very respectable image quality in my opinion. So when you're playing a map like this full of foliage, ignore this setting. Frame generation AFMF is actually pretty good. So in real life we're getting basically mid-40s. And the generated frame rate is into the 90s. So at 40 something FPS, I think frame generation is okay. There's some ghosting in the cloth behind my character, so it's not perfect. And why am I using the driver level frame generation instead of the in-game one? Well, I'm so glad you asked. FSR3 in this game looks pixelated AF. Especially in lower resolutions like this, runs worse than XeSS, so we'll get lower performance and frame generation, so I honestly don't recommend it just for the image quality alone of FSR3 in this game. Which is a shame, it would have been nice. So to sum up, would I recommend this game on the ROG Ally? Yes, if you're plugged to the wall, 1080p, performance XeSS, low settings. If you're not plugged to the wall and want to maximize battery life, 900p, balanced XeSS, and 18 or 20 watts, low settings. And that's basically it. And if you want frame generation, plug it to the wall, 720p, performance XeSS, go to the AMD control panel, enable AFMF, put it at like 30 watts, plug to the wall, and you have 40 to 50 FPS in the least demanding parts. And with frame generation, it will be into the 90s, some minor graphical things with cloth physics. But when you're portable, just target 30s at 900p and be happy. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'm blown away by how good this runs considering it's a demanding UE5 game. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys, thanks for watching.